The world we inhabit today is a consequence of choices made yesterday. At the heart of those choices lies the Industrial Revolution, a moment of unprecedented progress, the genesis of our current planetary crisis. Beginning in the 18th century, propelled humanity into modernity. A time of innovation, mechanization, factories rising, economies booming. The revolution came at a cost. As fossils burnt to power machines, forests fell, rivers turned black, the air became thick with soot. Cities expanded, but not with nature, against nature. A deep rupture between the built and natural environment.
From that rupture emerged environmental degradation, a systematic dismantling of ecosystem in the name of progress. Urbanization, often guided by the capitalist interest, turned nature into a commodity. Rivers were canalized, wetlands were drained, trees were felled to make routes for roads. And we applaud this as development. Is this development? Oh no, it's destruction. And now we live with the aftermath. Climate change, a phenomenon no longer distant or abstract. Melting glaciers, drought that choked the land, heat waves that shattered, floods that swallowed homes. This is not merely a scientific challenge. It is a crisis for justice, because those who contributed the least, often the urban poor, bear the greatest burden. So why now are we to continue down this path of extinction, disguised as expansion? Or can we imagine a different way, a more sustainable, more just, more green? It's a transformative practice. It reconnects the city with ecology. It sequesters carbon, mitigates heat island, manages stormwater, and restores biodiversity in the most unlikely places between highways, rooftops, in decayed industrial zones. Urban greening is the city apologizing to Earth.
I am sorry, says urban greening. It's more than just environmental benefits. There are social benefits, health benefits, economic benefits. Far beyond landscaping, far beyond aesthetics. Reducing stress, promoting physical activity, lowering risks of cardiovascular activity, helping with mental disorders. It is a force to be reckoned with. Mitigating climate change, the list goes on and on. Urban greening, holistic resilience and equity of cities.
Hey guys, we are the Shadow Witnesses. My name is Bono, and today I'm not alone. I'm with my co-host here. And what you just saw encapsulates what we thought about urban greening before joining this course, the advanced greening thought. So this is what Anguelovski, we have said is what is the urban greening orthodoxy, which is the dominant narrative, about our association with urban greening.
Yes, and the reason why we are the shadow witnesses is because we often neglect the shadow. We often see it as definitely not the main character. It's just this dark outline that's not necessarily a true representation of the object, right? Usually we would say it's disfigured and not the main focus. But we are interested in that shadow. We are not interested in the romanticized, manipulative object that has depth and texture, different sizes, and. We are not interested in that. We are interested in the shadow, the often overlooked aspect of society. And if you haven't figured it out yet, the shadow that we are referring to is the overlooked perspectives, and the object is the dominant narratives of urban greening in urban areas. So Imisa Chanda is a course that we have enrolled into, and the reason why you're seeing us here together, it has challenged us to look beyond our interests, or rather Bono's interest, that is urban greening in isolation. It has challenged us to think about its relation with each other. We're not just interested in the shadow, we're interested in the location that the object is located in. We're interested in that environment, the wall or the surface that the shadow is reflected on, the lighting that gives an effect to all the different perspectives of the object. And that is why you are seeing us here today. How does urban greening relate to my particular interest, land reform? Stay tuned as we explore that through this course, Imisa Chanda, an appreciation of words, script, and construction in planning in its evolving nature.
So this captures critical tensions, right? While developments are celebrated as progress, they often cast a long shadow when, justice is now delayed or what hidden or entirely overlooked sometimes. So finally, justice in the shadow of progress, or embodies the course emphasized, as you just said, on principled thought and action in planning. It challenges listeners to consider whether our existing frameworks for land reform and urban development can truly deliver justice in the post-apartheid context, or whether the more transformative approaches are needed. So the podcast is thus more than a critique. It calls for orientation to rethink, the values or priorities of planning itself. So by doing that, it's gonna be grounded, in its argument, in both theory and practice, and addressing the real world exclusions which are marked by the language of greening, and progress. So this podcast, serves as a living example of what cause seeks to cultivate, reflect, or critiques, and what the ethical engaged planners.
Indeed, and we found that the place of intersection between our two topics is the location in which it's located in. Well, its location in the urban space. So Bono focusing on urban greening, myself on urban land reform, and also another point of intersection would be the justice orientated lens. So when looking at urban spaces, it has been argued that long gone are the days where urban spaces are seen as this place of high opportunity in terms of economic diversity and economic opportunities in general, as well as high-end neighborhoods with high-end amenities. No. Those days are in the past. Now, in developing countries more especially, we are starting to realize an incline in the urban poor. They are continuously faced with exclusion from the market housing provision mechanisms. They are consistently facing inequalities that make this greener pasture not necessarily so green. When thinking about the city in terms of justice, which we usually associate with equity, inclusion. Can you think of any other word that pops up when you think of justice?
No, you've mentioned like most of them right now. Like also participatory.
Yeah, fairness. So those are the common words that are associated with justice. And if we're looking at the urban space in all its inequalities and exclusionary nature these days, don't you think that it then demonstrates a lack of justice?
But let's not draw a conclusion, on the broad terms, because justice is it's a quite broad term.
yes,
so
it is.
There are so many types of justice. For instance, we have transformative justice, transitional justice, social justice, corrective justice, procedural justice, and distributive justice. But in this podcast, we are much more interested in the procedural justice, but not as a theory or
an abstract concept.
Of academic debates, right? So. Yes. We understood like this, as more of a tool, to help us investigate, how decisions are made, who gets to participate, and how the outcome shape the communities in our cities.
Indeed, and most of the time we find that looking at urban greening from a procedural justice aspect. Most of the time, or rather not a procedural justice aspect just of yet, we think of urban greening, as our intro suggested, from a positive light, right? Yeah. We see it as this space, often public, that allows for a variety of social and economic as well as environmental benefits, right? Yeah. More especially myself, I don't know about you, but I saw it as this space that can foster community interaction, as the space that can foster and enhance recreational activities, as well as a wide variety of aspects in society, such as the quality of life. Yeah. But it has been argued, and you'll be hearing a lot of this phrase, it has been argued that urban greening has been used as a marketing strategy in cities. It is aesthetically pleasing. It acts as a pull factor that attracts these various investments into a place. It affects property values drastically. And have you ever heard of the phrase, money goes where money is?
Oh, of course.
Cash content, cash content. That is the argument. And when looking at urban greening from that perspective, we start to realize that sometimes urban greening initiatives become unwanted by low-income areas because they see it as a push factor for themselves. Because at times when these green initiatives are introduced, areas, or rather the native communities, become a stranger in an environment that used to cater to their needs, environments that were maybe selected as residential areas because of their response to the native community. They are then pushed out by gentrification, displacement in the formulation, or rather the development of these green amenities that are often seen in a very positive light.
So you are right, I would maybe like us to unpack some of these examples, right? So,
yes.
For instance, in Barcelona, the city, had an initiative where they wanted to implement some of green corridors, urban parks, right, in some of the low-income areas. But however, these initiatives shifted drastically, heavily, from the community-driven, right, initiatives to the capital-driven, redevelopment, redevelopment. So it ended up, attracting like various, international investors to the site, right? And as a result, right, because now it's not like led by the people who reside in the area, right? It's now like led by the capitalist like mind, right?
Yeah.
Then as a result, it leads to what we call green gentrification, where we found out as you said, the property gets to rise and some people gets to be excluded from these initiatives. So it gets us to ask some of the question that, if you stay tuned, you still have to you're going to you're still going to hear more about in the second episode. So secondly, in Medellin, so again similar processes in in green infrastructure projects, including the land management, and growth control. They wanted to beautify the area again, which contain low income areas. And I don't know. I keep asking myself why always low income areas,
Yeah.
But however, their intentions often they resulted in land appropriation, turning that communities like spaces into the privilege, landscape, for welfare, residents and tourists. So lastly, is the New Ocean example.
New Orleans? yeah, that's all right. New Orleans.
New Orleans. I'm
example.
sorry.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
again, it involved green projects, aimed at the climate, resilience. As we just said, urban greening is associated with is mitigating the climate. So also in this area. So they wanted to control the flood, or also to protect the vulnerable areas. So the planning process excluded the marginalized people, the communities, resulting in the spatial segregation. I remember there was an area which was more of an urban, a farm which was used by low income people just to do their small farming scale, right? Then as a result, now they are no longer there. They have been displaced to a new area which they don't even know, Yeah.
These are the harsh cases and often neglected and overlooked aspects of urban greening. And of course, these are international examples. And if you know any South African or cases of maybe, let's say, the overlooked aspects of urban greening in South Africa or in other African countries, we are very much interested. Please do comment down below. We would like to know the context, the location, and as much detail.
And this is who helped me to find a case study for my research.
Yes, please do help Bono. He's looking for a case study for his research. So any comment would be helpful. And so another argument is the fact that green infrastructure in low-income areas and high-income areas is quite different in terms of the quality. It has been argued that as you shift from high-income to low-income areas, the quality has shifted drastically, with low-income areas having degraded parks, low-income areas having issues of maintenance, insufficient trees, insufficient public infrastructure, and green infrastructure in high-income areas, on the other hand, well maintained, aesthetically appealing, and overall contributing to the quality of life. Why is it that there's this vast difference, right?
Yeah.
And why is it that it hasn't been acknowledged enough in literature? Another argument is that at times the urban poor, or rather the poor, have other priorities other than maintaining green infrastructure or even arguing for the presence of green infrastructure, because they have issues such as housing. Access to housing in the urban space has become challenging. They have issues with sanitation, and they also may have issues with access to other basic services. So
Yeah, I think a perfect example, just to link what you just said about, the perspective of low-income communities, right? It's gonna be Spreeuwenberg. Of course you know Spreeuwenberg. We've been we have been dealing with that side. I don't know, but it's one of the informal settlements in Gauteng, right? So it's located along the Jaskei River. And where there's different water sources, of course you'll find natural green infrastructures or green urban greening in that water sources, right? So people, right, instead of maybe finding that, or maybe the residents of Spreeuwenberg, instead of maybe finding that as an opportunity to create their own maybe urban parks, or these environment pleasing areas, right? They often, use those areas for housing, or maybe for waste management, instead of maybe creating these urban, instead of creating this greening, facilities, which they don't have. And you move, along the Jaskei River, you go to a place like Alexandra, right? Alexandra is just adjacent to Spreeuwenberg, right? And lately there have been, an initiative just to clean the river, and with the partnership between the community and the city of Joburg, right? And in doing so, right, they also create their own, public spaces by providing, different amenities, right, such as the swing, what else?
Besides that, the city of Johannesburg has contributed to introducing street lights, benches, those elements in public spaces that make it more inviting and more green, greener pastures. So I think you have mentioned an excellent example, and the arguments that have been posed against urban greening have illustrated critical flaws in urban spaces. They have highlighted the capability of initiatives that are seemingly an equalizing force in urban areas to be quite top-down at times and exclusionary at times. So from a procedural justice perspective, which is a combination of corrective justice and distributive justice, it has raised a couple of questions. Who is invited into these urban greening initiatives? In the planning aspect of it, in the implementation aspect of it, whose knowledge really counts? And are these processes transparent? Are these processes of the development and implementation accountable? And justice isn't only about, or rather procedural justice isn't only about the outcomes. It is about the steps that we take to get there. Stay tuned for our next episode where we will be exploring these questions and complex and dynamic nature of urban inequalities.
So we'll be diving deeper into the urban realities in the context which we are more familiar in Mzansi. We are the shadow witnesses. Thank you.
Stay tuned.